Now, before I tell you this story, I need you to do something for me. If you are new here, press that subscribe button right now, because I have got so many more stories like this one waiting for you. Stories from my life, from a time most of you have never seen and will never see again. And if you have been here before, if you already know my voice, then you know what to do. Hit that like button for me. It truly does help this old woman more than you know. And I want you to do one more thing before you settle in. Down in the comments, I want you to tell me where in the world you are watching this from. I have people writing to me from Ohio, from Pennsylvania, from clear over in Germany and Australia. And it warms my heart every single time to see how far these old stories travel. So type it in. Tell me your town, your country, wherever you are sitting right now, listening to an old Amish woman talk about a wedding that almost wasn't. Now, let us begin. My name is Rebecca. Most everyone who has ever loved me has called me Becky. And I suppose you can call me that too, since by the time I am done telling you this, you will feel like you have known me a long while. I am 84 years old this coming autumn, and I still live on the same patch of Ohio ground I was born on, though the house has changed hands and changed shape more times than I can count on two hands. I am sitting here on my porch as I tell you this, and if you listen close you might hear the buggy wheels going by on the road, because some things around here have never changed. Not in all these years. Not since 1961, which is the year I want to tell you about today. I was 19 years old in the spring of 1961, and I was engaged to be married. His name was Levi Troyer. And I want you to understand something before I go any further. I did not just like Levi Troyer. I did not just think he would make a fine, steady husband, the way a girl is supposed to think about these things when she is choosing a man to spend her whole life beside. No, I loved him. I loved him the way you only get to love once in your life, if you are lucky. Or maybe if you are unlucky, because that kind of love, the kind that takes over your whole chest and does not let go, that kind of love can break you just as easy as it can build you up. We grew up 2 farms apart, Levi and me. His family's land ran right along the edge of ours, and there was a fence row between our properties that my brothers and his brothers had mended together every spring since I could remember. I knew Levi Troyer before I knew my own last name good and proper, if that makes any sense to you. We were in the same one-room schoolhouse together, sitting on the same hard benches, learning our letters and our numbers from the same teacher, a stern woman named Fanny Miller, who had a switch she was not afraid to use. Levi used to make me laugh so hard in that schoolhouse that I got swatted more than once just for giggling at something he'd whispered to me. By the time we were both old enough for our Rumspringer years, that time when Amish young folk are given a little more rope, a little more freedom to go out into the world and see it before they decide for themselves whether to be baptized into the church. Levi and I had already decided in our own hearts what we wanted. We wanted each other. We went to the singings together, those Sunday evening gatherings where the young people meet up after the church service families have gone home, and we would sit close, and we would talk long into the night about the life we were going to build. He wanted a dairy farm of his own someday. I wanted a big garden, and a house full of children, and a husband who would still hold my hand across the table after 30 years of marriage. We thought we had it all figured out. In the fall of 1960, Levi Troyer asked my father for my hand, and my father said yes, because Levi was a good, hard-working young man from a respected family, and because he could see plain as day how much his daughter loved this boy. Levi and I were published in church that winter, which is our way of announcing an engagement to the whole community, and a wedding date was set for the following autumn, in October of 1961. I was the happiest girl in 3 counties. I want you to hold on to that feeling with me for a moment. That feeling of being 19 and in love and certain, so certain, that the rest of your life was going to unfold exactly the way you had dreamed it. I want you to picture our farm the way it looked back then, because it will help this story settle into your mind the way it has lived in mine for over 60 years now. Picture rolling green hills, split into neat squares by split rail fences and hedgerows. White farmhouses set back from gravel lanes, laundry snapping on the line in the wind, and the slow clop of horse hooves pulling buggies along roads that had not yet seen much English traffic at all. Picture a garden out behind nearly every house, tended mostly by the women and the young folk. Rows of beans and tomatoes and squash, and tucked into a corner of ours. That long, careful row of celery that Levi and I had planted together with such hope in our hearts that spring. Picture a 19-year-old girl in a plain dress and a white prayer covering, her whole future laid out before her as clearly and as certainly as the rows in that garden, never once imagining how quickly certainty can dissolve, and how much strength a person can find inside herself when it does. Because I am about to tell you how it did not. Now, I imagine some of you watching this are not Amish, and you might not know about the celery. So let me explain, because it is at the very heart of this story, and it is right there in the title, so I owe you that much. In our tradition, in the old order way that I was raised, celery is not just something you chop up and put in a stew. Celery is a wedding plant. It is a symbol. When a young couple gets published, when it is known throughout the community that they are to be married, the families begin growing celery, and they grow it in great abundance, far more than any 2 families could ever eat. Bundles and bundles of it, tall and pale and crisp, and it gets used every which way at the wedding. It is set out in vases on the tables instead of flowers, standing up tall and green like little bouquets. It gets creamed and served as a dish at the wedding meal. It gets tucked into the corners of the wedding dinner like a decoration and a blessing all at once. The more celery a family can grow, the more it says to the whole community, look how ready we are. Look how much we have prepared. Look how much love and labor has gone into this match. So in the spring of 1961, my mother and Levi's mother put their heads together, the way mothers do. And they decided whose garden plot would hold the celery, and how many rows, and when to start the seedlings. Celery is not an easy thing to grow, you understand. It needs rich soil and steady water, and it needs tending almost every single day. Hilling up the dirt around the stalks to keep them pale and tender, what we call blanching. It is not a plant that forgives neglect. And I remember standing in that garden with Levi on a warm evening in May, the 2 of us on our knees in the dirt together, hilling up soil around those little celery plants with our bare hands, and him looking over at me and saying, "Becky, by the time this celery is ready to cut, you will be my wife." I have thought about that moment more times in my life than I could ever tell you. I have turned it over and over in my mind, like a stone I keep in my apron pocket, worn smooth from all the handling. We worked on that celery patch together every week that whole summer. It became our little ritual, our excuse to be alone together under the guise of doing something useful and proper. His mother and my mother would send us out with the watering cans and the hose, and we would work side by side in that long garden row, and we would talk about our future, and sometimes we would not talk at all. We would just work quietly together and feel the nearness of each other, and that was enough. I watched those celery stalks grow tall that summer, the way I imagine some women watch their bellies grow round when they are carrying a child. It felt like we were growing our whole future right there out of the ground, one stalk at a time. By August, the celery was coming in beautiful, thick and pale green, taller than I had ever managed to grow it before. And everyone in the community remarked on it after church. How fine the Troyer and Miller celery patch was looking that year. How it was sure to be a wedding people would talk about for years to come. My mother was already planning the wedding dinner in her mind, counting how many tables we would need, how many pies, how many chickens to butcher. I was sewing my wedding dress in the evenings by lamplight, a deep blue dress the way our tradition calls for, not white like the English wear. And I remember pricking my finger on that needle more than once, because my hands were shaking with pure happiness every time I thought about October. I want you to sit with that image for just a moment. A 19-year-old girl, kneeling in a garden row beside the boy she loved, hilling up dirt around tender green celery stalks, both of them certain, so certain, that they were building a life together, one small chore at a time. Because in September, everything I thought I knew about my life came apart at the seams. It started small, the way most disasters do. You do not see the whole storm coming. You just notice the sky is a little strange, a little off color, and you tell yourself it is nothing. Levy had a cousin, an older boy named Dan, who had left the community some years before, jumped the fence as we say, gone out into the English world, and never looked back. Dan had come around that summer, visiting his parents who still lived plain, and I noticed that every time Dan came by, Levi got quiet afterward. Thoughtful in a way that unsettled me, though I could not have told you why at the time. Dan drove a car. You understand. A real automobile, shining and loud, and he wore English clothes, blue jeans and a leather jacket, and he talked about a job he had up in the city, and about music, and about a whole world that existed just beyond the edge of what we knew. I do not think Dan meant any harm by his visits. I truly do not. I think he was proud of the life he had built for himself, and he wanted his family to see it. The way anyone wants their people to see they have done well. But I watched something shift in Levi that summer. Something I was too young and too in love to name properly at the time. By early September, about 6 weeks before our wedding was to take place, Levi started asking me questions he had never asked before. Did I ever wonder what was out there, past the county line? Did I ever think about what my life would look like if I had not been born into this particular family, on this particular farm, in this particular church district? I told him, honestly, that I had not thought much about it at all, because I did not need to. I was happy. I loved my life. I loved my family. I loved him. And none of that required me to wonder about anything else. But Levi was wondering. And once a person starts wondering like that, truly wondering, it is very hard for them to stop. The Sunday before our wedding banns were to be read the final time, Levi did not come to church. His mother told my mother he had taken ill, a stomach complaint, nothing serious, and I believed it because I had no reason not to. I sat through that whole service with an empty feeling in my stomach that I could not explain, and after the service I walked over to the Troyer farm myself, against what was proper for an unmarried girl to do alone. But I did not care about proper that day. I needed to see him. His mother met me at the door with a face like she had aged 10 years since breakfast. She told me Levi was not there. He had left in the night, taken some clothes and what money he had saved, and gone off in Dan's car before the sun came up. He had left a letter for his parents, and a shorter letter for me, and I remember standing on that porch reading my letter with my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the paper steady. I will not read you the whole letter, because some things a woman keeps just for herself even after 60 years, but I will tell you what it said in its heart. Levi wrote that he loved me, that he was not leaving because of anything I had done or failed to do, but that he could not go through with a life he had never truly chosen for himself, a life that had simply been handed to him because of where he was born. He wrote that he was sorry, that he knew what this would cost me, and that he hoped someday I could forgive him, though he would understand if I never did. I stood on that porch, and I felt the whole world go sideways under my feet. Everything I had built in my mind for the last year, the wedding, the house, the children we had talked about naming, all of it collapsed in the space of reading one letter written in a hand I knew as well as my own. I walked home that day past our garden, past the celery patch that Levi and I had tended together all summer long, tall and green and ready for a wedding that was not going to happen. I remember standing at the edge of that garden row for a long time, just looking at it, at all that careful work, all that hope we had hilled up into the dirt week after week, and I could not make myself cry, not yet. The crying came later, plenty of it. But standing there that afternoon, I just felt hollowed out, like someone had reached into my chest and scooped out everything that had been living there. My mother found me standing at the edge of that garden as the sun was going down, and she did not say anything at first. She just came and stood beside me and looked at the celery too. And after a long while, she put her arm around my shoulders and said, "We will figure out what to do, Becky. We will figure this out together." I did not know then just how much figuring out there was still left to do, or how much it would ask of me. News travels fast in a small community, even one without telephones in every house the way we lived back then. By the following Sunday, everyone in our church district knew that Levi Troyer had jumped the fence, and that his wedding to Rebecca Miller was off. I cannot tell you how it feels to walk into church and know that every single person in that room has already heard the worst thing that has ever happened to you, and is trying very hard not to look at you, while also not being able to look anywhere else. The women were kind, in their way. They brought over pies and casseroles the way we do when there has been a death in the family, because in a sense, there had been a death. The death of a future I had been so sure of. But kindness was not the only thing waiting for me in that season. There was also shame, and I want to be honest with you about that, because I think it is important for people watching this today to understand how differently things worked back then. When an engagement broke, especially in a manner as sudden and as public as this one, there was a cloud that settled over the young woman left behind. Even though she had done nothing wrong, people wondered what was lacking in her, what she might have done to drive a good boy to leave the faith entirely. I want to tell you that nobody said such things directly to my face, but I heard the whispers after church, saw the sideways glances, felt the weight of being the girl the wedding fell through for, even though I had been the one left standing at the edge of that celery patch with my heart in pieces. My father was a practical man, and in the weeks after Levi left, I watched him carry a burden I had not fully understood until I was much older myself. There is the matter of the heart. Yes, my own broken heart, which nobody in my family dismissed or made light of. But there is also the matter of a community, and a family's place within it, and certain arrangements that had already been set into motion that could not simply be undone without consequence. Land had been discussed between our families. A small parcel along that shared fence row was to pass to Levi and me as a wedding gift from his father. Land that bordered our own farm and would have made both properties stronger for it. Debts of labor had been exchanged, favors given and owed, the ordinary web of obligation that holds a farming community together. When Levi left, all of that was thrown into confusion. And then there was Amos. Amos Troyer was Levi's younger brother, 17 months behind him in age, and if you had asked me before that autumn to describe Amos, I would have struggled to say very much at all. He was quieter than Levi, steadier, the kind of young man who did his chores without being asked twice, and did not draw much attention to himself at singings or gatherings. I had known him my whole life the same way I had known Levi, as one of the boys from the neighboring farm. But I had never once looked at Amos Troyer and felt anything more than the ordinary friendliness you feel toward a neighbor. About 3 weeks after Levi left, my father and Levi's father, a serious man named Jonas Troyer, sat down together at our kitchen table with the bishop. A good man named Bishop Yost, who had baptized half the district, including myself. I was not invited to that first meeting, and I sat upstairs in my room listening to the low murmur of men's voices through the floorboards, trying to make out what they were discussing and understanding only that it concerned me directly. My mother came up afterward and sat on the edge of my bed, and she told me what had been discussed. And I want you to understand that what she told me did not come from cruelty or from any desire to trap me. It came from a way of thinking about marriage and family and community that was simply how things were done. A way of thinking I had been raised inside of my whole life without ever questioning it, until the day it landed squarely on my own shoulders. Jonas Troyer felt a deep responsibility for the shame his son Levi had brought upon our family and upon his own. He did not want the arrangement between our two families to simply dissolve into nothing, the land forgotten, the labor and the goodwill wasted. And most of all, he did not want me, a young woman he had known and loved like a daughter for years, left without a husband and without prospects because of his own son's failure of nerve. And so he had proposed, there at that kitchen table, that Amos, his second son, would take his brother's place. That Amos would marry me instead, in October, on the very date that had already been set. I remember sitting on that bed listening to my mother explain this to me and feeling something close to disbelief. Marry Amos. Amos, who I thought of, if I thought of him at all, as Levi's quiet younger brother, a boy I had exchanged perhaps 100 words with in my entire life. Marry him in October. On the day I was supposed to marry the boy I actually loved. I told my mother no. I want you to know that. My first answer, my honest answer, was no. I cried that whole night, and my mother sat with me through most of it, not arguing, not pushing, just being present the way a good mother is present when her child is in pain. But over the days that followed, the pressure did not come from my mother. It came from everywhere else, quietly, steadily, the way water wears down a stone. Bishop Yost came to speak with me personally, which was no small thing. A bishop taking the time to sit with a 19-year-old girl and speak to her as though her feelings mattered, which I do believe he genuinely felt they did. He did not tell me I had to marry Amos. I want to be fair and clear about that, because I have heard this story told wrong before by people who did not live it. People who make it sound as though I was forced at the point of some invisible gun. Nobody held a gun to me. But Bishop Yost spoke to me about duty and about the difference between the kind of love that burns hot and fast like a fire in dry grass and the kind of love that is built slowly, like a barn raised board by board, nail by nail, over years. He told me that the love I had felt for Levi was real. He did not deny that for one moment. But he asked me to consider whether a marriage needs to begin with that kind of fire in order to become something strong and lasting. He also spoke to me, gently, about my own prospects. I do not say this to sound bitter. because I have long since made my peace with it. But I want you to understand the honest truth of what a young Amish woman's situation was in 1961, when her engagement broke under a cloud like mine had. There were not so many young men left unattached in our small district, and the ones who had already noticed, the way small communities always notice, that something unusual had happened to me. Whether it was fair or not, and I do believe now, looking back with an old woman's eyes, that it was not fair at all. My standing in the marriage prospects of our community had been affected by Levi's choice. A choice I never made and never wanted. My father, for his part, said very little to me directly during those weeks, but I remember one evening finding him alone in the barn after the milking was done, sitting on an overturned bucket with his head in his hands. And when he heard me come in, he looked up at me with such sorrow in his face that it nearly undid me all over again. He told me that whatever I decided, he would stand behind me, that he did not want a daughter who spent the rest of her life resenting the choice that had been made for her. But he also told me, quietly, that he believed Amos to be a good man, perhaps a better man in some ways than his brother had shown himself to be. And that goodness, steady goodness, was worth more over the span of a whole lifetime than the kind of passion that could be talked out of its promises by a shiny car and a cousin's stories about the city. I want to tell you now about the day Amos himself came to speak with me, because I think it is the moment that truly changed the direction of everything that followed. He came alone, on foot, walking the path between our two farms that I had walked so many times myself with his brother beside me. I saw him coming from the kitchen window, and my stomach dropped, because I did not know what I would say to him, this boy I barely knew who was being asked to marry me, or what he would say to me. This girl who had until 3 weeks earlier been engaged to his own brother. We sat together on the porch steps. Not the swing, just the steps, a proper distance between us, and for a long while neither of us said anything at all. Finally, Amos spoke, and I remember his words almost exactly, even now, all these decades later. He said, "Becky, I know this is not what either one of us planned for our lives. I know you loved Levi, and I am not going to pretend I could ever replace him in your heart. Not now, maybe not ever. But I want you to know that I am not agreeing to this because my father told me to, or because of the land, or because of anything except this. I have watched you my whole life. I have watched you work in that garden, watched you care for your younger brothers and sisters, watched you sit with old Widow Zook every week after church even though nobody asked you to. I do not need you to love me the way you loved my brother. I am only asking for the chance to earn something real between us, in time, if you will let me try." I did not answer him that day. I told him I needed time to think, and he nodded, and he stood up and walked back down the path toward his own farm, and I sat on those porch steps for a long while after he had gone, turning his words over in my mind, feeling something shift inside me that I could not yet name. I spent the next several days in about as much turmoil as a human heart can hold. I talked with my older sister Katie late into the night, the two of us lying in the dark in the room we had shared since we were small children, and she asked me questions nobody else had thought to ask. Not whether I should marry Amos, but what I actually wanted my life to look like. Did I want to leave the community entirely, the way Levi had? Did I want to remain unmarried, which was its own difficult path for a young Amish woman in those days, though not an impossible one? Or did I want to build something new, something I had not planned for, but that might still in time become good? I walked out to that celery patch more than once during those days of deciding. It was strange. standing there among those tall green stalks that Levi and I had grown together, thinking about marrying his brother instead. I remember running my hand along the top of one of the stalks and thinking about all the mornings we had spent hilling dirt around those plants, all the plans we had whispered to each other while we worked, and feeling a grief so sharp it nearly buckled my knees. But I also remember thinking that Celery does not know whose wedding it is going to. It only knows it was planted and tended and grown with care, and that care does not disappear just because the hands holding the vows have changed. I went to see Amos again on my own, walking that same path he had walked to see me, and I asked him plainly, sitting on those same porch steps, whether he was certain, whether he could truly build a life with a woman whose heart had, until very recently, belonged fully to his own brother. I did not want to enter into anything, even something arranged, even something practical, without both of us going into it with our eyes wide open. Amos looked at me for a long moment, and then he said something I have carried with me my whole life since. He said, "Becky, I am not asking you to forget Levi, and I am not going to spend our marriage measuring myself against him. I am asking you to let me be exactly who I am, and to see, in time, whether that is enough. I cannot promise you the kind of love that starts with fireworks, but I can promise you a love that does not run when things get difficult. I watched my brother run. I am telling you now, in front of God and in front of you, that I will not." Something in the steadiness of his voice, the plainness of it, reached down into the hollowed-out place inside me that Levi's leaving had carved, and it did not fill it. Not that day. Not for a long while yet. But it began, slowly, to build something new alongside it. I told Amos yes. I told him I could not promise him my whole heart yet, but that I would give him my honesty, and my effort, and my willingness to see what might grow between us, the same way we had once grown celery from tiny seedlings into something tall and strong. When word went through the community that Amos and I would marry in Levi's place, on the very date that had already been set, there was a mixture of relief and continued gossip, as you might expect. The relief came because our two families' arrangement, the land, the labor, the long friendship between the Miller and Troyer households, would remain intact. The gossip came because, well, people do love to talk, and a story like ours was simply too unusual not to be discussed at every quilting circle and every barn raising for a good long while. My mother and Levi's mother, who I began slowly to call Mother Troyer, went back to their wedding planning with a strange new energy, as though the interruption had only made them more determined to see this celebration through properly. The wedding dinner was replanned. The guest list, which had of course included many of the same families regardless of which brother stood at the front, was confirmed. And the celery, that tall green celery that Levi and I had grown together all summer, that celery which by now stood ready and waiting in the garden, untouched by any of the turmoil that had unfolded around it, would still be cut and used, exactly as planned, for a wedding it had never known was in question. I remember the day my mother and I went out to harvest it together, just the two of us, cutting those pale, crisp stalks and bundling them for the wedding preparations. My mother did not say much while we worked, but at one point she paused, looked at the celery in her hands, and said to me, "This ground does not care who plants the seed or who cuts the stalk, Becky. It only knows how to grow what it is given." I have thought about that sentence more times in my life than almost anything else anyone has ever said to me. Our wedding day arrived in the middle of October 1961, on a morning so clear and cold that you could see your own breath standing out on the porch before dawn. I want to walk you through that day slowly, because even now, all these decades later, I remember nearly every detail of it. The way you remember the most important days of your life, whether you want to or not. I woke before the rest of the household, the way I always had on important days since I was a small girl, too full of feeling to stay asleep any longer. I lay in my bed for a while looking up at the ceiling, and I will tell you honestly, my thoughts that morning were not simple. There was grief still living in me. Grief for the wedding I had once imagined, for the boy who was not going to be standing at the front of that house waiting for me. But there was something else too. Something that had grown quietly over the past weeks alongside that grief. A kind of settled calm about the path I had chosen. Or perhaps more honestly, the path that had chosen me, and that I had decided to walk with open eyes rather than dragging my feet the whole way. My mother and my sister Katie helped me dress in the blue wedding dress I had sewn myself back in the summer, back when I believed with my whole heart I was sewing it for Levi. I remember standing there while Katie pinned my hair up under my prayer covering, and catching my own reflection for just a moment in the small mirror on my dresser, and thinking, this is really happening. Not the day I imagined, but happening all the same. Our weddings, in the old order way, are not quite like the English weddings you may be picturing. There was no church building decorated special for the occasion. The ceremony was held right there in the Troyer farmhouse, since it was their turn to host church that particular season, with the furniture cleared out and backless benches set up in rows the way they always are for our services, filled with nearly every family from our district and a good number from neighboring districts too, since word of our unusual circumstances had traveled and, I suspect, drawn a few extra curious faces that day. The ceremony itself was long, the way our wedding services always are. Several hours of preaching and scripture before the vows themselves are even spoken, and I remember sitting on that bench, my hands folded in my lap, listening to the ministers preach about faithfulness, about Ruth and Boaz, about the kind of loyalty that is chosen rather than simply felt, and I could not help but wonder whether Bishop Yost had chosen that scripture with our particular story in mind. I looked over at Amos once during that long service, and he was looking straight ahead, his jaw set, his hands folded just as mine were. And I remember thinking how strange it was, how strange and yet how right in its own way, that this steady, quiet young man was about to become my husband. When it finally came time for the vows, Bishop Yost stood before us and asked the questions our tradition asks of every couple. Whether we believed this union to be arranged by the Lord. Whether we would be loyal to one another in times of sickness, in poverty, and in trial, until death would part us. I remember my voice shaking slightly when I gave my answer, not from doubt, but from the sheer weight of everything that had led me to that moment, everything I had lost, and everything I was choosing to build instead. Amos's voice, when it came his turn, did not shake at all. He looked right at me when he answered, and there was such quiet certainty in his face that something in my own chest settled, like a door closing gently rather than slamming shut. After the vows, we were pronounced husband and wife, and the whole gathering moved into the meal that had been prepared. And this, finally, is where the celery took its place of honor. There it was, exactly as planned all those months before. Tall, pale stalks arranged in vases down the center of every table. Creamed celery, served in great bowls alongside the roast chicken and the mashed potatoes and the bread. Celery that Levy and I had planted and hilled and watered together back in the spring. Now feeding the very wedding celebration that made me Amos Troyer's wife instead of his brother's. I sat at the head table that day, a new golden band nowhere on my finger, since we do not wear wedding rings in our tradition, but with a weight on my hand all the same where Amos's hand rested beside mine. And I looked down that long table at all that celery, and I felt something I can only describe as a strange and complicated peace. We were married. It was done. And now the real work of building a real life out of everything that had happened, was only just beginning. The first months of my marriage to Amos were not easy, and I do not want to paint you a picture prettier than the truth. We moved into a small house on a corner of the Troya land that Jonas had set aside for us. A plain little place with 2 rooms downstairs and a loft above. And we were, in every practical sense, strangers learning to share a life together. I knew how Amos took his coffee within the first week. I did not know, for many months yet, the shape of his fears, or his private hopes, or the things that made him laugh so hard he had to set down whatever tool he was holding. There were quiet evenings that first winter where we sat across from each other at our small kitchen table, with very little to say, both of us still finding our footing in a marriage neither of us had planned for, in the way most young couples plan for theirs. I would catch myself, some nights, thinking of Levi, wondering where he was, what the English world had shown him, whether he ever thought of the celery patch, or the porch, or the girl he had left standing at the edge of a garden. I am not proud of those thoughts. But I promised you honesty in this telling, and honesty requires me to tell you that grief does not leave a person simply because she has made a practical, even a hopeful, choice to move forward. But Amos was patient with me in a way I did not fully appreciate until many years later looking back. He never once brought up his brother's name to wound me, never once used my old feelings against me in an argument, though we certainly had our share of those. The ordinary arguments of 2 young people learning to run a household and a farm together. He simply kept showing up, day after day, steady as the sunrise, doing his chores, tending our small herd of dairy cows we had started with a handful of animals from both our families, coming in from the barn each evening and asking about my day with what I came to understand was genuine interest rather than mere politeness. The moment I truly believe I began to love Amos, not merely respect him or feel grateful to him, but love him, came in the deep cold of that first February. We had a terrible ice storm that winter, one of the worst anyone could remember, and one of our cows went into difficult labor in the middle of the night during the very worst of it. Amos was out in that barn for nearly 6 hours straight, working in temperatures that would have driven most men indoors long before, determined not to lose that cow or her calf, both of which represented no small portion of our young family's whole livelihood. I brought him hot coffee and blankets throughout the night, and I remember standing in the doorway of that barn at around 4 a.m, watching him work by lantern light, his breath clouding in front of him, his hands moving with such gentle care despite the exhaustion plain on his face, and something in my chest simply opened. The way a door that has been stuck finally gives way. He saved that cow, and the calf too, a little heifer we ended up naming Hope, though I never told him at the time why I had chosen that particular name. I think he understood anyway. Our first child, a son we named Jonas after his grandfather, was born in the autumn of 1962. Almost exactly 1 year after our wedding. I will not pretend to you that becoming a mother instantly resolved every complicated feeling I carried from that strange year, but I will tell you that watching Amos hold that baby for the first time, watching this steady, quiet man's face crack open with such pure, uncomplicated joy, was the moment I stopped measuring my marriage against the one I had once imagined and started simply living the one I had actually been given. We went on to have 6 children altogether over the following years, 4 boys and 2 girls, and I raised every single one of them in that same small house Amos and I had started in, though we added on to it twice as our family grew. Our life was not without its hardships, the way any farming family's life carries hardship, woven right through the good years alongside the bad. We lost a crop to hail one summer that nearly broke us financially. We lost a baby, a little girl we would have named Ruth, before she ever drew breath outside my body, a grief Amos and I carried together in a silence that somehow bonded us more deeply than words ever could have. We buried both of Amos's parents within 2 years of each other in the late 1970s, and I remember Amos weeping at his mother's graveside in a way I had never once seen him weep before. And I held his hand and understood, finally and completely, that this was a man who felt things every bit as deeply as his brother ever had. He simply did not let those feelings run him off in the middle of the night. I want to tell you now about Levi, because I know some of you have been wondering this whole time what became of him, and I think his story is a part of mine that deserves an honest telling too. For nearly 11 years after he left, we heard almost nothing, an occasional letter to his mother, brief and guarded, letting her know he was alive and working, first in a factory up near Cleveland and later, we learned, in some kind of office work he had trained himself for. His mother wrote back faithfully every single time, though I know it grieved her terribly, the not knowing, the distance, the wondering whether her son would ever come home even for a visit, knowing that if he did, he would be shunned according to our ordnung, since he had been baptized before he left and had broken that baptismal vow by leaving the faith. In the fall of 1972, Levi did come home, just once, for his father Jonas's funeral. I remember the whisper that went through the gathered mourners when his car pulled up the lane, an English car, driven by an English man in his 30s wearing English clothes, and yet unmistakably, achingly, still the same face I had once loved with my whole young heart. Because of the shunning, I could not sit at table with him, could not share a full conversation the way I might have with any other guest, but I saw him standing at the edge of the burial ground during his father's service, and our eyes met across that gathering for just a moment. And I want to tell you honestly what I felt in that moment, because I think it matters to this story. I felt sorrow for him, real sorrow, for the father he had lost, and for the years of estrangement that stood between him and the family that had raised him. But I did not feel the old ache I had once carried, that hollowed-out grief from the autumn of 1961. I looked at Levi Troyer standing there in his English suit, a stranger to me now in every way that mattered, and I felt something close to gratitude. Strange as that may sound, gratitude that his choice, painful as it had been to live through, had led me to the life I actually had. Sitting at home with 6 children and a husband who had never once, in 11 years of marriage, made me doubt where his loyalty stood. Amos stood beside me that whole day of the funeral, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back, the way it always did when he sensed I needed steadying. And afterward, walking back to our buggy, he asked me quietly whether I was all right. I told him I was, and I meant it completely. And I remember he looked at me for a long moment with something like relief in his eyes, and I understood then that even after 11 years of marriage, some small part of him had still, quietly, privately, wondered whether his brother's return might unsettle something in me. It did not. I want every person listening to this today to understand that clearly. By 1972, my heart belonged fully and completely to Amos Troyer, and it had for years already. Levi came back to visit his mother a handful more times over the following decades. always briefly, always carrying that same careful distance the shunning required of us, though I understand privately, informally, some of the family did maintain a gentler relationship with him than the church rules strictly allowed. The way families often find their own quiet ways around hard rules, when love insists on it. He married an English woman eventually, had children of his own I never met, built a whole life in that outside world he had once needed so badly to see for himself. I heard, some years back now, that he had passed away, peacefully, in his sleep, and I will tell you honestly that I said a prayer for him that night. For the boy I had once loved in that garden full of celery, and for the winding road his life had taken him down, so different from the road mine had taken. I share all of this with you not to dwell in old sorrow, but because I think it matters for you to understand the fullness of the story. Not just the wound of it, but the healing too, and the strange, unplanned goodness that can grow up out of even the most painful beginnings, if you are willing to tend it patiently, the way you would tend any growing thing. Amos and I were married for 58 years before the Lord called him home. 58 years, from that cold October morning in 1961 until a quiet January evening in 2019, when he passed in his sleep in the very same bed we had shared for nearly 6 decades, in a house we had built additions onto 3 separate times as our family grew and grew. I want to spend some time telling you about the years in between, because I think it would be a disservice to this story to let the drama of the beginning overshadow the quiet, steady goodness of everything that came after. Amos never became a man who spoke a great many words, not even after decades of marriage softened so many of his rough edges. But he became, over the years, a man whose actions spoke a whole language of their own. One I learned to read as fluently as I had once read my school primers. He was the kind of husband who noticed when I was tired before I noticed it myself, and would quietly take over some chore without being asked, without making a show of it, simply doing it and moving on to the next task as though it were nothing at all. He was the kind of father who never raised his voice at our children, not once in all the years I knew him, who disciplined with a steadiness and a fairness that earned him a respect from our sons and daughters that I watched grow deeper, not shallower, as they themselves became adults and parents in their own right. We built a good dairy operation together over those years, Amos and I, starting with that small herd from our wedding and growing it, slowly and carefully, into a farm that eventually supported not just our own family, but 2 of our sons' families as well. Once they married and started building their own households on land we helped them acquire, along that same stretch of road where I had grown up. I watched Amos teach each of our boys to milk a cow, to mend a fence, to read the weather in the shape of the clouds coming over the ridge, the exact same patient way his own father had once taught him, and Levi both. Though only one of those 2 brothers had stayed to carry that teaching forward into his own children, we had our grandchildren in time, more of them than I can properly count for you, without sitting down and working it out on paper. Though I believe the number stands at 31 living grandchildren and, as of this spring, 7 great-grandchildren, with an 8th expected any day now, according to my granddaughter Miriam, who is due to deliver within the month. I tell you this not to boast, though perhaps there is a little boasting in it, an old woman's pride in the family she has built, but because I want you to understand the scale of what grew out of that difficult autumn in 1961. 1 broken engagement, 1 reluctant, uncertain new beginning, and from it, over the span of 6 decades, an entire family tree with roots spread wide enough now to shade half the county. I think often, especially now in my old age, about that phrase my mother said to me while we harvested the wedding celery together all those years ago. This ground does not care who plants the seed or who cuts the stalk. It only knows how to grow what it is given. I did not fully understand the depth of that wisdom when I was 19 years old, grieving a wedding that was not going to happen. I understand it fully now, at 84. Having lived the whole long harvest of a life I did not choose in the beginning, but came, over many patient years, to love with my whole heart. Amos's passing, when it finally came, was gentle, the way I believe good men are often granted gentle endings. He had been slowing down for a year or two before that, his hands not quite as steady on the reins, his breath a little shorter climbing the stairs to our bedroom each night. But his mind stayed sharp right up until the very end. And his sense of humor, too, which had grown, over the decades, into something surprisingly dry and quick. A gift he had given himself slowly, one joke at a time, as though he had decided somewhere in his 50s that a quiet man could still learn to make his wife laugh at the supper table. The evening before he passed, we sat together on our porch, the same kind of porch where he had once come to me as a 19-year-old boy, asking for the chance to earn something real between us. And we watched the sun go down over the fields we had worked together for nearly 6 decades, and he took my hand, the way he had taken it so many thousands of times before, and he said to me, "Becky, I know I was never the brother you first chose, but I hope I was the husband you would choose again, if you had it all to do over." I told him yes. I told him, without a single moment of hesitation, yes, Amos Troyer, 1,000 times yes. I would choose you again, every single time, in every single life I might be given to live. He smiled at that, and squeezed my hand, and we sat together until the last light left the sky. And the next morning, when I woke, he had already gone, peacefully, quietly, the same steady way he had lived every single day of his life beside me. I still grow celery every single spring, even now, even though it is only me left in that big farmhouse most days, with my children and grandchildren scattered across the neighboring farms and coming by for Sunday dinners and holidays. I grow it in a smaller patch now than that great garden row Levi and I once tended together. But I grow it every year without fail. And every year, as I hill the dirt up around those tender young stalks with my old spotted hands, I think about the whole long journey this one plant has walked alongside me through my life. I think about the girl I was at 19, so certain that love only comes in one shape, the hot, fast fire and dry grass kind that Bishop Yost once described to me on the edge of my own bed of grief. I did not know, back then, that there was another kind of love waiting for me. The barn-raised kind, board by board and nail by nail, the kind that does not announce itself with fireworks, but simply shows up, morning after morning, year after year, decade after decade, until one day you look up and realize it has built something taller and stronger and more beautiful than anything the fire ever could have built on its own. If I could go back and speak to that 19-year-old girl standing at the edge of the celery patch, reading a letter that shattered every plan she had ever made, I do not know that I would tell her the pain was not real, because it was. It was as real as any pain I have felt in my whole long life. But I would tell her this. I would tell her that the ground does not care who plants the seed. I would tell her that a life built patiently, with honesty and steadiness, and a willingness to let something new grow in the place where something old has died, can become just as full, just as rich, just as deeply loved as the life she thought she had lost. Perhaps, in the end, even more so, because it will have taught her something the easier path never could have, about resilience, about grace, about the particular kind of love that chooses to stay even when it did not have to begin. I am an old woman now, sitting on the same kind of porch where a quiet young man once asked me for the chance to earn something real, and I can tell you, with the full weight of 84 years of living behind these words, that he earned it. He earned it every single day for 58 years. And I have spent every day since he left me thankful, truly thankful, for the strange, hard, unplanned road that brought Amos Troyer and me together in that October so very long ago. My days now look very different from the busy, noisy years when 6 children filled up every room of that farmhouse, and the dairy chores never seemed to end. I rise early still, out of habit more than necessity, and I make my coffee and sit by the window, watching the sun come up over fields that my grandson Amos, named for his grandfather, now farms with the same steady care his namesake always showed. My daughter Sarah stops by most mornings to check on me, though I tell her every single time that I am perfectly capable of managing my own kitchen, and she just smiles at me the way I once smiled at my own mother when she fussed over me in my old age. And I understand now, from the other side of that particular exchange, exactly how much love is folded into that fussing. I miss Amos every single day. I will not pretend to you that an old woman simply gets used to an empty side of the bed after 58 years of it being filled. Some evenings the quiet of this house presses in on me in a way that catches my breath, and I find myself talking out loud to him anyway, telling him about my day, about the grandchildren, about whatever small thing happened at church that Sunday, the way I always used to when he would sit across from me at the supper table, listening with that quiet, attentive patience of his. I do not know if he hears me, but I believe he does, and that belief carries me through the harder evenings well enough. My faith has been the steady ground beneath all of this, through every single turn this long life has taken, and I want to say that plainly before I close, because I think it matters. I did not understand, as a heartbroken 19-year-old girl, standing at the edge of a celery patch, why my life had been asked to bend in such a painful direction. I do not believe, even now, that I fully understand the whole of God's reasoning in any of it. But I have lived long enough now to trust that the bending itself was not a punishment, and was not a mistake, but was simply the shape my particular life was given to grow into. The same way a fence row bends around a hillside rather than cutting straight through it, following the land rather than fighting against it, and ending up, in the end, exactly where it needed to be. The celery patch is smaller now, but it still grows every year. And every autumn, when I look out at those tall, pale stalks standing in rows in my garden, I think of a wedding that almost was not, and a marriage that turned out to be more than I ever could have hoped to plant on my own. There is one more story I want to share with you before I let you go today, because I think it closes this circle in a way that still brings tears to my eyes even now, telling it to you. In the spring of 1985, our oldest daughter, Sarah, got engaged to a fine young man from a neighboring district, and when it came time to plan her wedding, she came to me one evening while I was hanging wash on the line and asked whether we might grow celery for her wedding, the same way my mother and Amos's mother had once grown it for mine. I remember setting down the wet shirt I was pinning up and just looking at her for a long moment. This daughter of mine, who had grown up hearing bits and pieces of the story I have told you today, though I had never told her the whole of it in one sitting the way I have told you. I told her yes, of course we would grow the celery. And that spring Sarah and I knelt together in that same garden row, where I had once knelt beside Levi, and later beside no one at all in my grief. and eventually found my own quiet joy working that soil with Amos on the weekends he could spare from the dairy chores. Sarah did not know all the history buried in that particular patch of ground, not the full weight of it. Not yet, but I knew it with every handful of dirt I hilled up around those young stalks, and I found myself talking to her as we worked, slowly, carefully, about her grandmother Troya, about the kind of love that gets to choose itself all over again every single morning, about how a life is very rarely a straight road, and how the bends in it are not always something to fear. By the time Sarah's wedding came around that October, a full 24 years almost to the day after my own, that celery patch stood tall and green and ready, exactly the way ours once had, and I watched my daughter marry a good, steady young man in a ceremony not so different from my own, and I sat at that wedding dinner with celery arranged down the center of every table, creamed celery served alongside the chicken, and I looked over at Amos sitting beside me, gray now at the temples. His hands rough and strong from 24 years of working that dairy farm we had built together out of a marriage neither of us had chosen at the start. And I reached over and took his hand under the table, and he looked at me and smiled. And I do not think either one of us needed to say a single word to know exactly what the other one was thinking. We have grown celery for 4 more weddings since then, our other children marrying one by one over the years that followed, and each time, kneeling in that garden row with a new young couple, hilling up dirt around those tender stalks, I have felt the whole long story of my own life folding back on itself, generation after generation, proof laid out right there in the soil that love, real love, the lasting kind, is something you plant and tend far more than something you simply fall into and hope survives on its own. I think that is the truest lesson this whole long life of mine has taught me. And I hope, in sharing it with you today, that it might plant something useful in your own heart too, whatever season of life you happen to find yourself in right now. Now, before you go, I want to ask you once more to do something for this old woman. If this story touched your heart even a little bit, I would be so grateful if you would press that like button right now, wherever you are watching from. It truly does help these stories reach more people who might need to hear them. And if you have not already subscribed, please do, because I have so many more stories from my life still waiting to be told. Stories about my children, about the years Amos and I spent building this farm together, about the friends and the losses, and the small daily miracles that filled up all those decades in between. And I still want to know, down in the comments, where in this wide world you are watching from today. I read every single one of those comments myself, and it means more to me than you could ever know to picture all these different corners of the world where my story has traveled to. Thank you for sitting with an old woman and her celery patch for a little while today. Until next time, may you plant your own life with patience, and may whatever grows from it surprise you with how much you come to love it.